Okay, so for a second, imagine that you work at Starbucks and a family of 5 approach you and they ask you to strictly buy decaffeinated drinks with coffee because their family does not support caffeine at all. And so you tell them, okay, I'll get that out for you right now. And then you start to make the drinks, but you realize that you're actually out of everything decaffeinated. All you have is regular coffee. And so before you tell them that, your manager comes and he's like, hey, who cares? Just give them the regular coffee. They're never going to know that it's not decaffeinated unless you tell them that. And so most people in this situation would be like, oh, like that's wrong, that's lying, that's something that's kind of against my morals. But because your manager told you to do that, you're going to go through with it anyways. So basically this is called obedience to authority. And if you don't know what this is, today I will teach you about what the concept is, why it's important, and I'll discuss an experiment that addresses that this is true. So obedience to authority is a social influence that pretty much makes a person act in ways that they normally wouldn't. So simplepsychology.org states that a person is given commands by a person with higher authority, and the person with less authority is quickly just going to follow whatever is told of them, even if they notice that what they're told is wrong. So a person with higher authority can be anyone. It could be a teacher, your parents, a police officer, prison guard, a person in the class with higher grades than you. It could be literally anyone. So an example of my personal life where I fall into obedience to authority often is with my mom. So my mom isn't someone who likes talking on the phone for hours on end. And so whenever she receives a call from someone that she knows is going to keep her on the phone forever, she tells me to answer it and to make up an excuse for why she can't come to the phone. So I'm like, okay, why not? So without even questioning her, every time she asks me to, I answer the phone and I say something like, oh, my mom just left the house, or she's actually in the shower right now, she can't answer the phone. And in reality, my mom's literally right in front of me whenever I say that. But I do it either way because she's my mom, she has higher authority than me, and so I assume that whatever she tells me is pretty much right to do, even though I know that it's wrong. So that's pretty much how obedience to authority comes into play in this situation, because I notice that what I'm doing is wrong, and it's not something that I would normally do, but I do it because she told me to do so. So an example, there's an experiment that I read on my book, my psychology book actually, and it's written by Laura Keene. So it explains that there's this experiment called the Milgram experiment, and what he did was that he got a group of students from Yale University, and he told them, okay, you guys are going to be part of an experiment that's going to look at learning methods. But this was actually a lie, just because he didn't want them to alter their behaviors in any biased way. And so the participants were paired up, and one was assigned to be a teacher and one was assigned to be a student. And so then he sat them across each other, put a screen in between them, and they played a word game. So whenever the student would say an incorrect answer, the teacher would press a buzzer, and then that would shock the student. So every time there was a wrong answer, the shock would increase. And what was trying to be seen from this experiment was how many people would go through with it. And so pretty much 66% of the people who were part of the experiment went through with it. And there were times during the experiment where the teacher, he or she would stop, and then they would say, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, like the person's screaming, they're getting hurt, like I'm going to kill them if I keep shocking them. But the person who was in charge of the experiment, he would say, no, you have to keep going, this is part of the experiment. And so the person would keep going, even though they know that it's morally wrong. So this shows that obedience to authority can happen to literally anyone. So lastly, I want to tell you guys why this concept is important. So like I said, this can happen to anyone. You don't have to be an evil person or a bad person to fall into obedience to authority. So another place that we see this that happened was during the Nazi times. The Germans who were involved in this, a lot of them stopped and they helped the Jews, even though they weren't supposed to. So the reason why they did this was because they knew that what they were doing was wrong. And even though they knew it was wrong, they continued to do it because they were following the authority figure, which was Hitler. And this, again, can happen to literally anyone, so it's important to stay aware about our actions because we might not even notice that we're doing it. So, all in all, obeying to authority is obviously something that plays a role in our daily lives since our world is literally made up of laws and rules. So it is something that we have to do, but we need to make sure that we're doing it the right way, not the wrong way. So in addition to that, we must make sure that we examine rules and laws because people make rules and laws and people make mistakes all the time. So we need to make sure that even though we're told to do something by someone higher than us, it's important that we examine it and we make sure that we're doing what's morally correct because the effects of this can be as extreme as, you know, the Nazi situation.
All right, Christina, I like the visualization that you had at the beginning of the example at the Starbucks. It does tie into the topic eventually. You've got a nice preview of what the structure is going to be. I thought in the body of the speech that you clearly transitioned on the first couple of points, but when you got to the end of the speech, that seemed to be where there was a little bit of a problem, and delivery issues break down a little bit there also. But before that, I thought you were doing a fine job looking at the audience, talking to us. You're not overly dependent on your notes. You seem animated while you're speaking to us. Lots of audience contact. You stand pretty confidently in the one spot. It did seem a little bit odd that you never stepped forward, you never approached one part of the audience or the other. So although I do think that, you know, having that stance is a good idea, it does seem a little unnatural that you just never kind of get into the moment of speaking. And I think that that would be something that maybe when you relax a little bit more, you'd be able to do more naturally. Like I said, I think your facial expressions look reasonably engaged. Sometimes I think you could be a little bit more emotionally involved, but when it comes to connecting with the audience, you did okay. Your voice, I think, I don't have any criticisms of it. I think that it's pretty solid. Maybe you could be a little bit louder except in that last section where I did think that you slowed down. I'm not sure if you got lost, if you weren't quite sure what it was you were going to say, but it did feel like you hit a rough spot there. And it had gone pretty well the first 2/3 of the speech, but when we were winding down, suddenly it was, you weren't quite sure where it was that you were going, and your pacing kind of was affected as a consequence. I do think that the conclusion seemed to come up a little abruptly, and you could probably use more of a summary. All right, thank you.